And welcome into In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. Hey there, I'm Aaron Cheslock. As we do each week, we catch up with local coaches and athletes and walk their path to the particular point in their careers that they're at right now. And we got a great one with Palmetto State ties this week. The head coach of the Limestone Saints, Brian Turk, joining us. Coach, thanks for making some time for us. Hopefully we're getting closer to a more normal type of football season this fall. I know that you guys have had to do a ton of adjusting over the last 18 months. We'll get to that in a minute. But, I caught up with you guys earlier this week. I'm assuming that the majority of these guys are just happy to be back out there practicing.
Yeah, first off, Aaron, thanks for having me, man. This has been an honor for me. I was happy to make time. Anytime to talk about Limestone football is a good time for me. The guys, you talk about night and day, I guess, from the springtime. It's incredible. I mean, just being able to be meeting in person again, being able to have, physical contact, if you want to give a kid a hug, if he's having a bad day or something, just not being worried about, what's going on. And obviously you're being respectful of what's going on around our nation and the world, but just getting back to doing some normal things that we're such creatures of habit in football, and just being able to do some normal stuff is fun.
I do think that it is important to note that, the COVID numbers are higher than all of us want to see. But since they're trending back up and, the kickoff of the season is just days away at this point, what's the level of concern with you guys? Obviously, trying to mitigate as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's the word, mitigate, and then controlling what we can control. We talked about this in the springtime, all of 2020 really, of the best way you can show your teammates how much you care for them is to take care of yourself. If you have some sort of symptoms, don't be a hero. Don't try to tough it out. Communicate that with our sports medicine department. And then, most importantly, mask up when you can, and just try to stay distant and go from there. But it is tough, like you said, because we're in a time where it's that fatigue factor a little bit, where you've heard of it so much. And then all of a sudden now you're so close, you're on the precipice of your next season where it seems like real football. But I think the guys on our team are doing their part, and they've not worn down on it. And it's been good so far. Really, honestly, has.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, just the different kinds of things that programs are trying to do to just make sure that A, their roster stays healthy, and B, to get through an entire season. But, we'll touch on your backstory in a minute here, but you've been in a lot of different buildings throughout your career, at the Power 5 level at South Carolina, and now at the Division II level. When you think about the process of trying to sanitize stuff and keep things in place to make sure week to week there are no cracks in the armor, so to speak, how much tougher is it for a Division II school that doesn't have the budget of a Power 5 school like South Carolina?
I think that's always going to be the challenge. We joke and talk about balling on a budget a little bit over here. And, I think if people are doing their part, it's going to work out the way it should be. We have a great group of people here at our university that have a lot of care and passion and pride for our school. And they go way above and beyond to make it, that's, like you mentioned, we are a Division II school, but if you look at our amenities and the way that this thing is operated, it's nowhere near that, in my opinion, just the way that it goes from top down. And, if you want to talk about, do you have less money to buy sanitizer stations? Yeah. Do you not have some of the stuff like the NFL teams do where you walk through and get, your body temp and stuff like that? Yeah, we don't have that, but you can still make do with what you have and make it work. And it's as long as everyone's bought in and everyone's pulling their same direction, which is what we have here. We got a lot of synergy in terms of that.
Yeah, and obviously it's easy to motivate kids. When you're 18, 22 years old, you think you're immortal to all kinds of things. But when you're talking about missing football games and hurting your team, that's without question a motivating factor when you're looking at a football season, certainly at the outset of it. But, for most of us football fans, we flip out or we flip on a game on Saturday, or we go out to watch a ball game on Saturday. But we don't really know the day-to-day things that players and coaches go through. And especially in the last 18 months, can you personalize or maybe just, give us a better idea of the amount of speed bumps that the players on your team and the staff had to deal with? The fall 2020 season canceled, a shortened spring slate. Now you're getting ready for a second season in the same calendar year, and all while a pandemic's going on.
Yeah, it's a lot. When you put it in that perspective, it is quite a bit. If you rewind a year ago to about this time last summer, we had just, we were just getting back to school, and everyone was pretty fearful. It's one of those moments, and and I think when you're in the trenches, you kind of having a hard time realizing exactly what's going on. But when you kind of zoom back a little bit, our kids, what they weathered in that year of 2020 is incredible. We had a lot of guys show up in July excited about a potential 2020 season, not, pandemic withstanding. And then we're here for about a couple of weeks. Then all of a sudden we have to send everybody home because they delayed the start of the season. So then everybody comes back at the start of the school year. We start practicing in our limited ways, social distance, masked, all that kind of stuff. And then we have to take a 2-week pause. And then all of a sudden the shortened season in the fall, it's even shortened even more. And so now the kids are going, where's my season? I'm a senior in college. This is my last chance to play ball. And this is kind of being taken away from me. So then we go to Christmas break and we come back and we're having a lot of meetings as head coaches in our conference. I'll give our league, South Atlantic Conference, our commissioner, Pat Britz, a huge round of applause, which is what they were able to pull off for all of our sports, but football, most importantly, selfishly for me. But, we come back in January, we're trying to get our footing and feel out what's going on. Are we coming up the other side of this thing? We get into practicing, and then again, there's another pause. Like, shoot, Aaron, I got COVID. Our whole staff got COVID. It was one of those. It was before the vaccine stuff was made available for how the rounds came out, and so we had one coach who had already had it, and he was still sitting out there. It was like him and a couple of student assistants running practice, and we were coaching from Zoom virtually, and so then we go into the season, and we had 7 games scheduled. We lose our first 2. And the kids are already discouraged. We play the first game. We pick up another game out of like 10 days before the first start. And so to just summarize it, it was up and down, and just was a roller coaster of emotions. And in the moment, you don't realize how much it really does wear on you. I mean, I'm telling you, Aaron, played 4 games, and I've coached, 2 seasons now as a head coach. I was more mentally fatigued after those 4 games than I was the first 11 I was as the head coach here at Limestone. And I needed a break. I was burnt out. And it was just having some time to regroup was huge for me.
And this will be the final one on COVID, because certainly, I think we all understand why it's an issue, and perhaps the issue in the country, the world right now. But I think we're all just tired of talking about it. We want to get back to our normal lives as soon as we possibly can, when that's appropriate. But, you're still early in your coaching career. You have, and again, we'll touch on your backstory here in just a second, but, so many big names, mentors that have helped you along the way. But you're part of a select group of coaches, regardless of sport, regardless of level, that are coaching right now that have had to deal with getting games played during a pandemic. Is there someone that you relied upon, or someone that has given you a little bit of advice? Because even Coach Spurrier, for all the time that you spent with him, he never had to do anything like this. So I don't know where you go to. There's no handbook, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know who you go to for advice for how to handle this, unless you're just talking to your colleagues that are coaching right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and that's always the joke about football. It's a copycat sport. If one team does it, you start doing it. And if everyone thinks they're making progress doing something, then everyone starts doing it. There was a lot of conversation between coaches in our league. I reached out to some of my mentors around just like, how would you handle this and keep these guys apart, but not too far apart where they don't get a chance to be, connected. And honestly, Aaron, a lot of it was trial and error. And, I know that sounds kind of crude, but I mean, you try to do things the right way. And if it doesn't work out, that was the one, honestly, to just follow up on what we were just talking about. That was probably the most wearing down thing. There was a problem to every solution. Here's what we're going to do. This will work this time. All right, now we got to change it. All right, well, no, this will be the new fix, and then we got to change that too. So, trial and error, I think, is part of it, and then truly just doing what's best for your kids. And so, we talked. The most people I spoke to were our guys in our conference. Like, how are you guys doing it? What are we doing to be there? I did speak to some people over at Carolina, some people I've known for a long time, Clint Haggard, some people like that, who's the head athletic trainer there, and just kind of picking his brain because I respect him tremendously.
Yeah, I understand that you think that sounds crude, but there is no handbook for how to handle this thing. And even at the highest levels, we saw major problems. And, we're starting to see a couple at the high school level, to be honest with you as well. So we're hoping that, kids can play as many games as possible in the safest possible environment throughout the fall season. The show is called In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. So we want to catch up with folks on your backstory here. And what a story it is. A Columbia native, graduated from USC in 2010. And before we get started with you jumping into the coaching realm, you left as a student, as the new Gamecocks coach, the now new Gamecocks coach, Shane Beamer, left the program after his first stint. What do you know about Coach Beamer? What did you hear about him when you started working at SC? And as a Gamecocks alum, what are your thoughts on him taking over at South Carolina?
I'll take it in one piece first. Shane Beamer, I was a student manager, student assistant at the time when he was there. I can't remember the year exactly, but just one of the salt of the earth type of people. I don't know if he's ever met a stranger. I don't know if he's ever had a bad interaction with another human being. I've been around some really high level people who are just really true. Sometimes they're talking to you and you're like, this can't be real. He's one of those people. And, I remember writing him some emails and he emailed me back immediately. Here's some advice. Here's something you should do. Look and do this. Try to pursue these things. And it wasn't like I was prying and being like, can you please do this? It was like an abundance of information coming back of hey, this is how I would navigate these situations if I was you. And if you need anything else, please don't hesitate. And sometimes, people say that, and it really is just a nice way to end the conversation. For him, it was real. And it was exchanging emails, text messages, conversations in person, and just trying to really find out how I could get into this thing. What was the other question? I'm sorry. It was a three-parter.
Yeah. So, when did you had an experience with him there, so I must have had my dates wrong there, and now him taking over as the head coach of the football program, coming back after a decade away, and it's his first time being a head coach, so you can relate on that.
For sure.
But he has, about 3 decades of being an assistant under his belt on his resume as well.
So, that's the follow-up part. I when people get hired and they're like, was never had head coaching experience. I'm like, well, someone's got to give it to you at some point. I think at some point back when college football was founded, there was one program and then the second program started and that coach didn't have head coaching experience. So at some point, someone's got to. And obviously I'm a little biased because I didn't have head coaching experience, but I'm always proud and I take a lot of I have a lot of support for Coach Tanner and those guys taking a leap of faith in somebody that has just a wonderful human being. That's one thing I really found is in my time as up here at Limestone, we've been able to work up at Clemson's camps. And, when I was young, it was like, man, I bleed garnet and black. And then I started working in college coaching and you're like, well, that's, that's Clemson, we're Carolina. We got to win that game at the end of the year. As I started working these Clemson camps here at Limestone, I'm like, man, these are wonderful people. Brandon Streeter, what an incredible guy. Dabo, what an incredible guy. And so you get into the profession, you kind of lose a little bit of that, that part of it. But it's still, I look at what Shane is going to bring to South Carolina, and it's going to be very similar in my mind to the relational aspect that Dabo has and the whole welcome home thing and the family atmosphere. That's not fake. That's real. And that's being true and loving kids and putting them first. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. The players loved him to death when he was here at South Carolina. And, now being the head coach and putting your fingerprints all over the entire program, I just think it was a good hire. And, I can't speak for anything else, but just what I'm seeing from the outside looking in, been pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't played a game yet, but I think he's hit a home run in pretty much every area he can. He's been great with the media. He's been great with me personally. So perhaps I'm a little biased there, but I do think the comparison with Coach Sweeney is valid. I see a lot of similarities there. And, just from my perspective, being a Baltimore native, as soon I've been doing this long enough where I've interviewed multiple former Pittsburgh Steelers. And in my mind, I know I'm supposed to hate them from my upbringing, but they're nice guys, right?
Right.
And
yeah. There's
actually the psychotic nature of being a fan of whatever sport when you're
right.
involved in sports.
I mean, that's you go to Clemson. Clemson's a beautiful town. It really is. I mean, I remember growing up going, oh man, that's the armpit of the state, blah, blah, blah. So it's a beautiful town. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that'll tick off all the Gamecock fans watching this. Again, I can back Coach Turk on this. That is a true thing. 2011 offensive intern working with the quarterbacks at SC, and most of the folks watching this know the star power on those Gamecock teams, guys like Marcus Lattimore, Connor Shaw, Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Swearinger, so many future legends of South Carolina football, big-time NFL players, some guys still playing right now. Were there any wow moments or in practice or funny stories that we don't know about that you're allowed to share?
Yeah, man, so many. Goodness gracious. I mean, being there in that time was a special moment. Like I said, growing up a Gamecock fan, I could tell you right where I sat in the stands, section 18, right next to the opposing team's band right there. It was a fun time. It was right on the borderline. But, growing up and being able to be part of it and then actually having hands-on in some capacity, affecting some version of winning was huge. The wow moments were left and right. I remember throwing after practice one time with Alshon Jeffrey. He's getting guarded by Stephon Gilmore. I'm going, these guys, I just hope I don't break him. I don't throw a bad pass. I mean, he rolls his ankle or something. I'll never hear the end of it. I probably won't work here anymore. And, we're at the bowl practice. I mean, shoot, there's so many stories there. And I mean, it's just one of the best things about guys who work for Steve Spurrier. Every story is true. Everyone's got their own impersonation and everyone's got their own version. It's like the Gospels in the Bible. They're all like the same story told from 4 different perspectives. That when you get like Spurrier people together, some good times are going to ensue. Just please understand that if you can get that together at a dinner party, you'll have a good time. One of the big wow moments for me is the day-to-day approach for like a Marcus Lattimore, just such disciplined, coming out master of his craft. Obviously what happened to him was tragic, but I think also kind of a freeing for him a little bit in terms of his life. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he's found a lot of peace and happiness in what he's doing. But you look at, you guys got AJ Cann, Connor Shaw, Devontae Holloman, who's, all these guys are, Shaq Wilson, people who are good buddies of mine still to this day. Connor Shaw and his wife and my wife are very close, and Dylan Thompson and we spoke this morning actually on the phone, and I'll probably talk to Connor tomorrow. It's just one of those things where the relationships were real, and it was just an amazing time to be at South Carolina. You can think about times where you see Jadeveon Clowney running somebody down at practice and you're going, how on earth is that possible for a guy that size to move that fast? Or you see Ace Sanders being shifty out on a punt return at practice and you see him doing it in the game and you're like, well, I've seen that 100 times at practice. Kind of grew numb to it a little bit. But I'll never forget I always tell people when my time at South Carolina, the games and the wins and the losses that's the icing. But the relationships and the people you met along with, that's the cake, and that's the substance that you'll carry on with you. You can remember, you can get together, man. Remember the time we played at LSU and, we were number 3 in the nation and we, down to the 4th quarter, what a great atmosphere. Or that time we beat Georgia at home or something like that. And you can reminisce on those, but then you start talking about practice and, hey, Coach Spurrier coming out with his shirt off and not wearing shoes at practice and saying something ridiculous in a meeting and something like that. So that's the part you end up really gravitating more, not necessarily talking about the games.
You're pretty good at this interview thing because you segued into my next 2 questions, but I'll go with the first one here. Offensive analyst, grad assistant coach, and QB coach at SC. You're working with both Shaw and Thompson, each threw for over 5,000 yards and 40 TDs in their career. Obviously, Connor Shaw turns into one of the greatest South Carolina football players of all time. I would argue that perhaps Dylan Thompson is one of the most underrated South Carolina football players of all time. But what always fascinated me, and again, I got here in 2013, so I saw 1 year of their relationship up close. Obviously, I knew the names, but they seem to work so well together. And, even when Shaw was starring in 2013, Dylan Thompson would come in for a big pass and they'd use both of them interchangeably. And the offense was, so prolific that they didn't really miss a beat. But what does that say to a guy who's been involved with quarterbacks, who's been in charge of other quarterback rooms, that you can have that kind of star power work well together? What does it say about the 2 individuals in Shaw and Thompson to be able to step aside and let the other one shine a little bit as well?
Yeah, the quarterback room is a unique position because there's sometimes 6, 7 guys in the room, and all of us, including the coach, are represented in the starter who makes it out on the field. And so there can be really a cattiness in that room a little bit. it can be a jealous thing. G.A. Mangus was the quarterback coach at the time, and I was so grateful to be an assistant for him and help him and learn from him and just be there to help and extend his presence. But, Connor and Dylan, one thing I've always challenged my guys, and I use them as a reference to the guys I got here at Limestone, they really truly celebrate each other's successes. It was not like, dang, Dylan just doing a touchdown pass. I think it was, what was the year 20, was it 2013, 2020? I got my years mixed up. We were up at Clemson. Connor is not the starter. Dylan has to start in a spot start. He finds out on
that's the 2012 rivalry.
2012. There we go. 2012. I get my year. Yeah, that's the even years when we go up to Clemson. And so we go up to the game, and Connor had been limping around all week, and Dylan gets the starting spot, and Connor is not pouting the entire time. If you watch the stuff on YouTube, he's cheering Dylan on like crazy. He's one of the first people to meet him off the sideline. Then we go in that bowl game at Michigan, and the two of them, like you mentioned, are switching in and out, and they're just going crazy for each other, celebrating each other's successes. And, that just speaks to the character of those two guys, and just being able to play for each other and with each other is just impressive. And it speaks a lot to the culture that Coach Berger created. I know he gets a lot of, he's got a lot of different descriptions, but he really was a unique person.
And that, again, you are a pro at this. So final question on this era of Gamecock football, best Steve Spurrier story. Make sure that is kosher for television.
Yeah, I got a couple. I'll keep it G-rated, and I won't mention names on some certain things. We're playing Arkansas. I want to say the years 2012, 2011, in that range. And, we ended up winning the game, and we're there. We would not meet as a team on Sundays. We would take Sundays off. We would meet as a staff after church on Sundays, and they would have Coach Berger cater something up there on Sundays. And we'd watch the film, break down as a GA, you're there early working and getting everything kind of paving the way for the next week. And so the next Monday rolls around, and so we start meeting with the team, reviewing the game film, and we're in the big team meeting room that's no longer there. That's on the backside of Williams-Brice, above where the old weight room used to be. And we're waiting outside of the special teams meeting, and this particular offensive lineman played a poor game, and he walks up to Coach Berger and says, "Coach, I'm really sorry. I played a bad game." He's, it ain't your fault. That's our fault for giving you a scholarship. Don't worry about that. Well, needless to say, the kid was devastated, and he walked off. Coach Berger didn't miss a beat. He just walked on and did his thing. And so it's one of them. So, we've all been in it. The other one I always like to share with people, we've all been in interviews before, and I'll slide my computer back a little bit here. I want to name the particular coach, and so he goes up in the coach's office. You got to realize coach's office was like a museum. It had his Heisman in there and helmets and like memorabilia. And like, if you're a football nerd, you would have walked in there and spent an hour just looking at all the stuff in his office. So it was really pretty overwhelming. And so he's got this big TV on the wall, like 70-inch TV. And he didn't really know how to work it much. So he knew how to turn it on and be on the Golf Channel. And that's all we watch is the Golf Channel. He'd read the newspaper, the state or whatever, upstate newspaper. And so he's having an interview, and he comes in and interviewing a particular guy. And I'll see if I can get this here. He's talking, he gets his foot up on the table, and he's got his bare foot. And he takes his shoe off. He gets his toenail clippers out and starts clipping his toenails right there in front of during the interview. And he goes, "So you want the job?" "All right. Yep. Sounds good." so they ended up hiring the guy, but that was one of those moments. That's why I said, any story you hear is true. There's some truth behind it all. So he a wonderful person. I never want to sound like I'm disparaging him. I loved every second working for him. You can name stories. Like I said, you get people together and it can go, and talk about, he always referenced like south of the border and, just some other things like that. It was just, he would know where you're from. He'd ask you, "Hey, how far is it from south of the border? How far does this creek run?" And he'd ask you some crazy questions, off the wall stuff. He was a hoot. He was a hoot. Yeah,
I think for every great Steve Spurrier story there's a genuine feeling of camaraderie and mentorship from all the guys, and obviously his coaching tree is pretty big at this point. So it's always fun to hear more about the head ball coach. I just got to interview him again at the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame. And I'm not quite sure how old he is at this point. Obviously getting up there, but still sharp, can still one-liners like no other, without question.
We got to take care of him. He's a national treasure.
Yes, without question. So Coach Muschamp takes over. You're now the assistant director of recruiting, handled offensive recruiting. Go to Limestone in 2017, working with running backs. So that's a big jump for you. Obviously, your first, coordinator job, I think it was right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
What the motivation behind going to Limestone? Were there other offers, or was that an opportunity you saw and that's one that you targeted?
It was an interesting time. I actually really like Coach Muschamp. I worked for him for 18 months. And, I think everybody was always like, does he just walk around the building and yell at everybody? I mean, he could not have been more nice to me. He was very kind with my wife and kids. My third child was born that year we were together, and could not have been more supportive and friendly. And I have nothing but good things to say about him. And when the time for Limestone came, I actually went to Coach and I said, "Man, Coach, I'd really like to get back on the field. I want to get my toes back in the grass." And, he wanted to keep me in the role it was, and there was no hard feelings at all. But I just pursued this. I had some other places I interviewed at, and some not offers necessarily, but, second interviews here and there, and came down to a couple different places. And my wife and I, like I said, we're South Carolina people. Where we live in Bowling Springs is about an hour and a half from where my folks live, and about 2 hours from downtown Columbia. And so it was just seemed like a nice stepping spot. I feel like when I got here, I could contribute to help, and not like come in and like change anything, but like just offer any kind of ways I could help the head coach at the time, Mike Furry, and give him take something off his plate. That's what all I was trying to do, is come in and just affect winning in a way to give him a chance and lighten his load. And then, you're probably going to lead into it. I never thought I'd be here and be the head coach 4 years later, however long it was.
Yeah, so it was the end of 2018 where Coach Furry steps down to take the Bears wide receivers coaching job.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
My memory serves me right. And you're named the head coach after the season. And one of the big things in 2018 was Limestone was in a tough spot, and a 15-game losing streak was snapped. What was that moment in turn? I know you're young to the program at that point, but in totality, I have to imagine the weight that gets lifted off a team's shoulders when you end a streak like that. Where do you think that ranks for you personally, that feeling of elation, and for the program as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it was my first win as a head coach, so it's something I'll never forget. And just, losing doesn't necessarily mean you're a loser. I know that's kind of a weird thing to say. It's sometimes it just kind of can snowball, and you can be talented and you can have all the right things inside of you. But if you look at it like from a big perspective, sometimes you can become a product of your environment. So you start believing things and you start seeping into your mental part of it. We had talent here. We really did. And it just took a moment. We had a very tough schedule my first year here. We played some really tough games. Played West Alabama, a perennial top 25 team in Division II, followed up by West Georgia, and then a third game, our first conference game against Tusculum that first year. All real tough, down to the wire games, the Tusculum game being the only difference. And we finally get that UNC Pembroke game. And, I've never been to Pembroke, North Carolina in my life. And I always remember it because it was the first time I won, and my wife was there, and my sister-in-law, and just a great feeling. And honestly, Aaron, just seeing it for the kids, it just felt like a weight was lifted off their back, that, this is, if we believe in what Coach is saying and the culture he's building here, then these good things can happen. We ended up going on and we won the next game as well against Catawba that year. And then, we battled, and it's just taking that first step in that first year of ours here, 2019, I believe, or 2018. I can't, the years all running together now, but it was just that first most important step in the staircase.
Yeah, I always equate it to tight football losses to maybe a guy coming in from the bullpen and throwing good pitches, but the hitter keeps fouling them off, right? And then eventually the count goes full, and you end up giving up the walk. And you might have pitched that guy great. It was just a little bit better, and that can start becoming a mental game.
Yes, exactly.
From a coverage standpoint, I was certainly glad to see you guys get off that hump because long time coming. So let's fast forward 2021, 4-game spring schedule. You go 1-3. I think the fact that you guys are just having games in the spring is really the story there. But I saw you guys at fall camp. The team looks spirited. A lot of good talent on this roster. But again, we touched on this earlier. Just such a mental jungle and the physical toll that all this has had on them over the last 18 months. As we get set for the season, and it does become about wins and losses again, what's your message to them? And, have you thought about what you're going to say when they run out of that tunnel the first time against North Greenville?
Haven't gotten that far yet, to be honest with you, and that's on purpose. I think one thing that I can talk on a national level for a second, that we've seen in our camp as compared to just using like the NBA, for example. They play 2 seasons really like in a calendar year. You're starting to see a little bit of wear and tear of practicing as many times as we did in the spring semester, playing the games, and then taking basically 2 months off ish, a month and a half, excuse me, and then coming back and getting into it. Their mind was ready, but the body was weak, I think is the phrase. It's like we're ready to go, but I'm actually still a little beat up from practicing in the spring semester. So that has been the first hurdle for us. And then learning to practice in a new way. It goes back to what you're talking about with COVID, where we had to learn all these lessons to kind of think outside the box. We've learned now in football that water is not bad for you. We've learned that stretching is a good thing. And it's now that we've learned these lessons from COVID. Hey, maybe we need to take a little bit more time off. We don't need to hit as much. We need to do some things where we can think better. That's a long-winded kind of lead up to this. Camp has been good so far. We knock on wood, we have avoided some major injuries. The kids, like you mentioned, have bought in really well to what we're doing. They're just so excited to be back around each other and some semblance of real football. It's been challenging. We've pushed them in tough spots. We practiced at 6 a.m. this morning just to kind of switch some things up and find ways to be creatively challenging without, being physically demanding. We'll do the same thing tomorrow. We have our first scrimmage on Saturday, and then we'll start school on Monday. I learned from Coach Spurrier's. You always take the first day of school off and practice, let them kind of get situated. And, you got an 18-year-old kid trying to find Math 101, and then he's got to worry about what do I do against cover 3. And so to me, it's just let's let them, they are student athletes. So let's let them get their feet underneath them, and we'll meet, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit and get the rest of the season going. But as far as, like I said, the message for the team is just let's win the day. Everything's been such a big picture. You want to focus on the mountaintop. You want to focus on the top of the conference. And to me, if you can just worry about the next step, let's win practice. All right, now practice is over. Now we're in a training camp day. Let's go win lunch. Let's go eat the right way. Then let's go to the weight room and win the weight room. Then let's go to the meetings and let's win the meetings. And so if I can start stacking up those wins, and it kind of goes into the whole process over outcomes type of deal, where I can control my process, but I necessarily can't control my outcomes. But hopefully in that time of my controlling the process, my outcomes can be a little bit more predictable because of the things I've put in during that time. So our kids have bought into that mantra, and they really have. We've talked a lot about climbing and things I never thought I would talk about or read about and research for topics of conversation. But there is a lot of analogies that you can carry over, and our kids have bought into it.
Yeah, and I do think that to your point about practicing different, football's a game that's always evolving. And when it comes down to it, whether we're in the aerial assault era that we're in right now, or if teams are still running the wing T and the I, it does come down to blocking and tackling. And when you are not able to practice blocking and tackling in preparation for football, obviously that becomes problematic. And then you got to weigh, what's too much practice, and how much do you need for practice for these players before it's safe for them to go out on the game field and try to block and tackle. That was my number one concern when COVID first came up. I played linebacker and guard in high school, and I could only imagine the amount of injuries that guys would sustain if you don't have the proper technique practice and just the reps that it takes to build up what it feels like to get hit and deliver a hit.
For sure.
So, navigating around those waters, I do not envy football coaches in this era having to figure out how to do that. I wanted to ask you from more of a national perspective, COVID, obviously the biggest story over the last 18 months, but in college sports in general, boy, what a transformation, right? You go from what we've known for the entire NCAA era to all of a sudden name, image, and likeness has become a policy in place. The transfer portal is really revolutionizing things. When you think about what is the biggest change to college sports over the last 6 to 8 months as all these things start to come in, conference realignment, I guess I should throw in there as well. In your opinion, just from a guy who's been around the sport, since you were a kid, what do you think the biggest change to college sports has been?
I think the biggest change, and just maybe in such simple terms, is they've given more agency to the players. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes when some power or control or something's given up, I think there's some fear with that. But if you look at it, giving a guy an opportunity to earn some money, giving a guy an opportunity to, hey, my coach transferred and, my position here is different. And, if I'm working, at a company and, the person who hired me leaves and now the next person comes in does not give me an opportunity, I'm free to leave that company. But why am I stuck as a college football player at a school? Now, I think obviously there can be some times where it gets abused. And I think sometimes then also in the media, and I hate that word media, like you guys are all some evil conglomerate, but where it gets, talked about where, well, this guy left here. Why did he do that? And, everyone's got their reasons of why they do certain things. But I think sometimes it has been abused for sure. But that's also to the settling in part, I think, Aaron, where like you're just learning how to figure these things out. Like you mentioned earlier, there ain't no playbook for this. This is all uncharted waters. To use another analogy, like who's been around this before? Like, I don't know, like maybe no one's ever been, like you see all these big Power 5 schools bringing in companies to help these guys in these contract agreements. I was flying to the Peyton Manning Passing Academy, the Manning Passing Academy, excuse me. And this woman next to me found out I was a coach, and she started grilling me on the NIL stuff. I mean, she was just like letting me know, like, oh, they're abusing kids. It's terrible. I'm like, ma'am, like, some of these major schools, they're really trying to help them and trying to get them on their feet and trying to prepare them for life after football. Because, as you know, not many of them go play in the NFL. Even it's a small percentage. And so she's like hitting me with all these hard hitting questions. What are you doing to prepare your guys? I said, well, it's got to be education. And, there's some rules like that I can't help my players negotiate their contracts, and I can't help my players do certain things, but we have people here at our school who can help them, put them in position to talk to other people. But, it's, to me, it just, like I said, some freedom of movement, some agency, if you will. That's what I think the biggest change has been.
Yeah, I think with the name, image, and likeness, obviously, we live in a country founded on capitalism, so you want everyone to be able to go get theirs. But I do think it's important for an 18-year-old kid to have some sort of guidance to know, the implications of having money at a very young age. Yes. And all of a sudden, because again, all these changes happen very quickly. I do want to ask you about the transfer portal as someone who's been involved in recruiting for a decade now, and what that impact can have in sort of a trickle-down effect to the FCS, then the Division II, Division III, and in particular high school recruiting. And the example I always use is if you're a top Power 5 team in Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, that feels like they're one or two pieces away from competing for a national championship. And the normal route would be go recruit that position. But now you can just go to the transfer portal and plug a guy in that's been playing for 2-3 years. But what that does is that takes away an opportunity from a high school kid to get an opportunity. And it happens very quickly. If you look at the amount of programs in the college football world, certainly in college basketball, where there are fewer roster spots. But when you learned about the transfer portal, and now that you've seen it in effect for the last 6 months or so, what are your first thoughts and I guess your concerns with how this thing can get out of control?
It can definitely do that. We have someone on our staff who is dedicated to checking it twice a day. I think, the other day he sent me 12 new names just from one day. So we have to monitor that. I think that's just real. That's just the world we live in. I think if you kind of like, I'm not going to go in the transfer portal, you kind of got your head under a rock a little bit. The way I see it, Aaron, I think we have a supply and demand problem really in college football. Where we are, we added this COVID year for all these players last year, which is the right thing to do because of what happened. Like you mentioned, some schools even attempt to play a season. So these guys get an extra year. And so they're like, hey, man, grass is greener. I'm going to go jump somewhere else. And I think, like you said, I'm a Power 5 school. I'm a Group of 5 school. I'm looking to fill a need. Let me get a guy who's played college football, who's a little older, who can jump into this spot. And now I'm adding a piece like people do in the NFL during free agency. Hey, I need to shore up my left tackle spot. Well, here's a kid at Wofford who did a good job for us. I think, there's some players in our state. Obviously I'm a fan of all the schools here. I've root for them, but you see some guys moving from Wofford and North Greenville and Limestone and Newberry and Charleston Southern, and they're all moving to some different spots. I mean, shoot, South Carolina got a Division II transfer from Wingate and someone in our league. And so I think sometimes then kids see those success stories and go, well, that can be me. And then they jump in the transfer portal and they're like, well, the musical chair starts spinning, the music's going, and all of a sudden the chairs start filling up. And then there's a date where they're kind of out in the cold, so to speak. And that was honestly, Aaron, when I went out recruiting for this 2021 class, that really, really hurt this group. It really did. And, we recruit in the state of North Carolina heavily. We're very close to the border. They didn't even get to play till the spring. And so they were already like, oh, coach, what this is, I want to take a visits and I'm running out of time and space and money and all that stuff. And the class of 2021, I'll be interested in what it does for 22. You saw this summer was a different trend where all the kids were really going to those Power 5 camps. And we're lucky enough to work at Clemson, like I mentioned, South Carolina, just locally. UNC Charlotte opens up the doors to a lot of coaches to come and work them. But, the camps are closed off in 2020. And so there's a different road. And so everyone just adapted a little bit. I'll be interested to see what it does for 22 and 23. And I'll be interested to see any kind of rules they bring down the road for this senior class of college seniors, what they're going to do for them. But, the changes have been crazy. Even Aaron, back to my time at South Carolina, that was 4 years ago. The transfer portal thing is something, like I said, you got to be checking it daily and you got to be monitoring that and making sure, hey, I've got a little scholarship money left over to maybe throw something at a kid like that. And I think you look at, there's going to be more movement between the Division I's and Division II's. I'll be interested to see how it plays out for junior colleges and high schools. That'll be something to track in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for kids to have the freedom to go where they want to go. I do worry for high school football in totality and whether opportunities are being taken from the next generation, because that, simply put, is the future of the sport. That cycle needs to continue if we want the sport to be the number one in America or, as competitive as it has been at all levels. All right. Let's get rid of all the heavy stuff. Let's go some lighter questions here. Born in Columbia, you're a Gamecock. You watched a lot of South Carolina football. You're Mount Rushmore of Gamecocks football.
Players?
You name it.
Wow. Okay. Well, players has got it. I mean, Connor Shaw's got to be on there. Marcus Lattimore's got to be on there. George Rogers has to be on there. I think Sterling Sharp has to be on there. I think those are your four there. I think, Mount Rushmore games for me, I'll throw that one out for you. The win against Alabama in 2010, I think that's the peak there. The fifth win against Clemson in 2013, that was a great one. The win against Georgia, I believe that was 2012 at home. That's up there. And then the fourth one, the Missouri double overtime game. That one's up there. I'm blessed to be a part of all of them. I mean, I've witnessed some amazing history in that stadium, and something as, like I said, growing up a Gamecock, you can't put a value on that. Yeah, without question. I think that 13 rivalry game is top 5 loudest stadiums I've ever been in. Easily. But you hear the term, if it ain't swaying, we ain't playing. But when you actually experience it on the sidelines, it's a deafening sound when Willie B is hopping. Let me tell you this: when you experience it, in the press box, and you really feel it swing, it's real. Yes, it's real. That is true too. Football coaches in particular, you guys have like zero free time as is. You're immersed in your work all the time. You're a dad, so I'm assuming the majority of your spare time goes to your kids. When you have that hour of not Coach Turk, but Brian time, what are you doing? That's a great question. Honestly, I'll just be real with you. I really enjoy like watching movies. I love reading. If my kids, we got Disney Plus for my kids, I think I watch it more than they do. I'll throw Star Wars on there. I'll throw the Marvel movies on. I love movies. I love going to the theater. Like I said, I do read a lot. And obviously, I spend time with my wife, but the very little bit of time I get from me time, this is the kind of part where you're like, man, you don't have a life, man. Like I'll put football on. I watch
That's the
football.
gig. That's the gig. And I mean, for the majority of the guys that I've interviewed over the years, it seems like it's hard to disconnect. It really is. Like, you need the mental break, but you're so focused on the next thing, the next day, the next game that it's just constantly on your mind.
Well, and even like watching other football games, you're like, oh, I like that. Or let me see how, Coach so-and-so handles these situations. And you end up finally, you said you can't turn it off. And you're like, oh, I like that play. Let me write that down. And now we live in that DVR world where you can rewind it and you're like, oh, that was pretty good. Yeah, I like that. But I think to your point, like, I really got into basketball was my first love growing up. It's one sport you can play in the yard. And if your buddies go home, you can continue playing. So I do really enjoy college and NBA basketball, and that's kind of my push away. I enjoy golf. I'm fun to play with, but I'm terrible. To me, it's like 4 hours away from my kids. I'm going to get killed when I get home.
All right. Well, that was my next question. If you could go pro in any sport, what sport would you pick?
Oh man, shoot! I just say football. I love football, but being a quarterback would be great. And obviously, shoot, the best spot would be like a backup quarterback or the guy who holds the clipboard. Then you don't get hit, and then you just stand there and collect them checks. But I think
it's better in this era now because you can barely hit the QB.
100%. Oh yeah,
I'm Elway and Marino and Jim Kelly. I'm looking at guys now going, "You kidding me?"
We watched some old quarterback highlight film. I think it was Brett Favre or something as a quarterback group the other night. And he's just getting splattered back there. I'm like, that's a Coach Spurrier term, splattered. Getting splattered back there. And the kids are like, oh my gosh, you can really hit the QB back then. I was like, yeah, it ain't like today.
Most embarrassing moment coaching so far. Doesn't have to be your time as a head coach, but the one that you think back on. I need you to be honest here. And you replay it in your mind and you're thinking, why didn't I just say this or do this? How could I be so stupid? We'd like you to entertain us with that moment, if you don't mind.
Oh, I got to narrow them down, huh? Okay. I think it's like, everyone's going to have those moments where you slip up on names or something like that, or you kind of mess those things up. Shoot. I remember we're playing Missouri in Dylan's senior year, 2014. This was embarrassing. And also like, it's one of those moments where like Coach Spurrier and I had I'm up in the press box and I'm feeding him back information about what's going on the other defense. Hey, they're blitzing on this down. This is the coverage you're getting to these formations. And he
come on, man. You're at the edge. Just jump.
I say the wrong thing. I say the wrong coverage. And it cost us. It cost us in the game. And he came back on Sunday and said, you really thought it was that coverage? He's like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, and it was one of those like, it was, I felt terrible. And obviously, if you look back, we lost that game. I don't think I caused the game, but I definitely, it's something I'm like, how did on earth I said the wrong thing? I probably had something going through my head. But that was pretty embarrassing to me. I don't know if that's necessarily what you're looking for, but I have not had egg on my face. I got one other story. So we're going to Coach Spurrier's house, and he has like a kind of back to the football party at his place, and you can play egg toss and other games like that. And so he gets the coaches out there and the GAs. And so we're throwing the egg toss back and forth, and me and his son, Scotty, are on the team. And I throw the egg toss, comes to me. I catch it, of course, because I'm an athlete. And I load up to throw it back to Scotty, and it goes off my fingertip and goes up and right back down, right on top of me. And he's like, he works with the quarterbacks. He can't even throw an egg. And so that was pretty embarrassing. That was pretty embarrassing.
With the Missouri story, I'm sure that's a learning moment, and to be honest with you, now that you're a head coach and you got guys doing that for you, it can tweak how you react to some of your assistants making
no doubt
a play like that. Who's the coach you try to model your style after the most?
Obviously Coach Spurrier plays a lot in that. That's in the way he approached the game, X's and O's. I really believe in the way he's an attacking type of a personality in terms of play calling. In terms of demeanor or how I try to be, obviously sometimes I'm a huge fan of Tony Dungy. I love Tony Dungy. Read all of his books, had actually a chance to meet him one time. He came and spoke to our team at South Carolina, and it was one of the highlights of my career. And then honestly, in terms of like player connection, I love what Greg Popovich does with the Spurs. I mean, he's just kind of on the forefront of getting to know guys on a deeper level than just the sport, and knowing they're their whys and what gets them into this and stuff like that. And, some congregation of those three guys, I would kind of say X's and O's, Coach Spurrier, and then people, Coach Dungy, and then just connection, Coach Popovich. You look at Popovich with the USA team, these are all big time athletes that are going over there and not getting paid anything. And he gets them to rally around a cause and they win the gold. So pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a pretty good list to have there in terms of starting your head coaching career, just your first few years in. Final one, Limestone season will be a success in the fall of 2021 if?
Limestone's season in the fall for 2021 will be a success if we can handle success and failure evenly. Don't get too high on the successes, don't get too low on the failures. If we can go step by step and take care of the stuff that's in front of us and not look too far ahead, we can be successful. If we start looking up and looking to see how far we can go or how much farther we need to go to get to where we want to be, it'll be a long ways. We have a very challenging schedule. Our conference is top notch. It's one of the top ones in Division II, in my opinion. And we open up with North Greenville, an in-state team that we see every day in the recruiting trail. And we have a lot of respect for them, and we're trying to build our program, emulate what Coach Farrington's doing over there.
He is Brian Turk, the head coach of the Limestone Saints. As he just mentioned, again, he is segueing into my next comments or questions throughout this entire interview. The sign of a true pro. They open on the road, the Saints do, at North Greenville on September 4th. It's a primetime game. Should be quite the atmosphere. We're having Coach Farrington on the show as well. Do you have any message you'd like me to give him?
Tell him to rest all of his starters on September 4th. And honestly, if he just wants to just say we'll forfeit and move on to the next one, that'd be helpful too.
Coach Turk, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much for joining us, and best of luck this upcoming season.
Thanks, Aaron. Go Saints.
Brian Turk, the head coach of the Limestone Saints, one of the many football programs getting set to kick off the season in the next few weeks. I want to thank you for joining us for this week's edition of In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. We got another great episode for you next week. Have a great one, everyone.